Hi friends, and welcome to the Healthy Beyond 40 show. I'm Michele, mama 4 and military wife, and I'm passionate about helping women get healthy from the inside out so they can feel better and live their best life. Do you feel like you're struggling to lose weight and get in shape? If you're ready to develop healthier habits, exercise consistently, and lose weight sustainably, then you're in the right place. I combine my expertise from my doctorate in physical therapy to my experience as a health coach, personal trainer, and yoga teacher to bring you actionable steps for a healthy lifestyle. No magic pill here, so lace up those shoes and get moving. All right, so welcome to the show. I'm so excited. I have Dr. Kris on the podcast today. She has her master's in health psychology. She is also a yoga teacher and a naturopath doctor, and she lives here in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So Dr. Kris, just tell us real quick, just a little bit about you.
Well, like you said, I'm a naturopathic physician, and I actually graduated from medical school when I was 45. So I spent the majority of my life as a health educator and group fitness instructor. I also have raised 4 kids like you. Mine are a little older, though, ranging in about 22 to 32 or 31. But there's an age difference there. I spent so much of my life in the passion of health and wellness, prevention, and just educating. But by the time I was getting into my mid-40s and my kids were farther along in school, I really always wanted to be a physician, but never really bought into the conventional medical model. I always felt that the disease-related model was just not productive. And so I found Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. Now it's Sonoran University of Medical Science. But regardless, it was an opportunity for me to get my medical degree and earn my licensure in the state of Arizona and be able to treat people on a regular basis for all types of issues and all types of diseases, and also to help with prevention. But at this point, I find myself quite specialized in women and men over the age of 40, and specifically, hormone and endocrine related changes. So a lot of hormone replacement and all of those things that go with that.
Yeah, I love that. And so before we dive into the hormones, I just want everyone to hear from you. Tell us really the importance of having that healthy lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, and why that's so important.
If I have a patient who walks into my office and I'm like, yeah, for sure, you are perimenopausal, you're menopausal, your hormones absolutely could stand to be replaced in a bioidentical manner. If they are not already practicing a healthy diet, exercising, reduced stress levels, and sleeping, it's almost like I've given them, a candy corn. It's probably not going to do very much. It's like spitting in the ocean, because your body is a well-oiled machine. And even if I try to replace one piece of your endocrine system, you are still going to be storing fat because your body is concerned it's not going to have enough energy. You're going to feel sluggish and unwell because you're not moving your body on a regular basis. If you're not sleeping, well, then you're going to feel fatigued all day long. Stress levels in anybody, I think we know stress is probably the biggest killer of all of us in the long run for everything that it can do. So I always talk about, treat the whole person. Find or treat the cause and treat the whole person. The only way to truly treat and replace hormones is if you treat the whole person. In other words, if nutrition isn't on par, if we're not exercising, if we're not sleeping, and if our stress is out of control, the only thing that those hormones are going to provide for us is maybe a little blip in our day, but there's no way it can do all of it. It's not a panacea. It's kind of like when you talk about, a quick fix for weight loss. It's kind of a quick fix. It's not going to do it. It's the whole person, and it's all of the things that matter.
Yeah. And I always like to start with that because I've heard other doctors say that too. And I think we're so used to that like pill for an ill society. So even when it comes to natural supplements or natural hormones, we want to do that same thing, but we really need the strong foundation of healthy habits. So I want everyone to always keep that in mind. So tell us a little bit, what are some of the non-sex hormones that women struggle with and what they can do to help them?
I would say, well, it's interesting because when you talk about a foundation, when I teach people about their hormones, I create a triangle. So you can imagine a triangle in your mind, and keep in mind, this comes from the fact that I was a health educator in the 80s. So this was the old food guide pyramid. So now you know what's happening. But on the bottom, you know where carbohydrates used to be. On the bottom are your adrenal glands. And you might be able to, in addition to that, put in there gut health. So basically, your foundation are your adrenal glands or your adrenals, and the hormone you're talking about in this case, we're talking a little bit more about cortisol here, is on that bottom level. That provides your body with the opportunity to fight or flight, which is an opportunity. It's good for it. You want to be able to get out of trouble if you need it, but you don't want it going all crazy. And now you're stressed all the time and up and down, and now you have way too much cortisol. Above the adrenal glands is the thyroid. So the thyroid is a big, big deal. It helps the adrenal glands. Let's say you've been under stress forever and ever and ever. Now your adrenals are going to lean on your thyroid and ask your thyroid for help, which is why there's probably 75% of the women that walk into my office, and men too, that have hypothyroid issues. Their thyroid is suboptimal. Now, on a conventional medical scale and on conventional medical labs, would they be diagnosed as hypothyroid? Nope. In my office, would they be diagnosed as suboptimal thyroid? Yes. And I know you've probably heard that before, but anybody that's working in the field that I'm in knows all about that. So we have to correct the adrenals, whether that be with nutrients, like it would be a good choice, nutrients in terms of vitamin C, the B vitamins, magnesium, all those foods that contain those things. Treat the adrenals, then treat your thyroid. If we need to give you some glandular support, or maybe we need selenium, maybe we need some more iodine, vitamin D again. Once those hormones have been corrected, now we can kind of move on to your sex hormones.
Yeah, I love how you gave that visual. I'm always a visual person, so I was drawing it as you were talking. But yeah, really starting with that gut health, the adrenals and thyroid, and really just how cortisol and stress can really rule that. And I liked how you gave that connection between, when our adrenals get depleted, it's going to pull more from the thyroid too. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, I'll ask like, oh, have you had your thyroid checked? They're like, oh yeah, it's a normal. I'm like, did you do that at a conventional doctor? Like, it's like tiptoeing for me since I'm not a medical doctor. But yeah, so I think always getting your thyroid and labs checked by some type of functional medicine doctor or naturopathic is important. So let's go right into those sex hormones. Share briefly how the sex hormones change as women are getting older and above 40 and that impact it has on their body. So
that couldn't be a more loaded question, and I absolutely love it. And I'm going to drive us back to our pyramid for a minute. So our triangle that we were just at. So remember, adrenal, gut health on the bottom, thyroid is next. Then the next level up are your sex hormones. The sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone all belong there. Let's stay in the case of women specifically today. So in the case of women, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all live there. Now, at any age, and I'm talking any age, any menstruating female, if your adrenals are shot, too stressed, thyroid is suboptimal, your adrenal glands are going to go looking for help from progesterone, which is one of your sex hormones. It's going to call on progesterone to help because progesterone can convert into cortisol. So now we've done what's called a progesterone steal, brought down your progesterone. So we have just now demonstrated why women at any age might skip a period when they're under stress, might end up with what we call estrogen dominant, which is sometimes a term that people like and don't like, but what have you, excess estrogen in your system, leading to weight gain, emotional issues, lack of sleep, all those things, not able to sleep. All those things happen because now progesterone's not there balancing it out, because progesterone and estrogen should be on a teeter-totter and they should be evened out. So having those sex hormones in our little triangle, that kind of talks a little bit about the progesterone steal. And that happens at any age. Now let's talk about perimenopause. Perimenopause is the 10 years before menopause. 10 years. 10. So you might be, some women are not menopausal, don't miss their period for a full year until they're 55. Other women's, they're 50. This means that some women are in perimenopause at 45. Some women are in perimenopause at 40. Perimenopause is any time when your hormones start to fluctuate. Your ovaries don't give out at the same time. They're in and out. Your hormones don't leave at the same time. So testosterone is usually the first hormone to kind of leave the building. You feel pretty fabulous when you're 35 because you got an adequate amount of testosterone. But after that, unfortunately, it's kind of like downhill, if you will, because now your testosterone is just not there to give you your get up and go, your juju, your libido, your all the good things. That goes first. Secondly, progesterone. Progesterone's the second hormone to kind of fizzle out. And progesterone's super important to decrease anxiety and really important for sleep. So the number one issue I see in my perimenopausal females is the fact that now they can't sleep. They always used to sleep, but now they can't sleep. And now their periods are longer or they're heavier. All of those things that happen when there's less progesterone in the system. And then finally, the end of the road is the depletion of estrogen. And the final depletion of estrogen is what is going to happen over a year or more time before you have that last menstrual cycle. And there's so much more that happens before that last menstrual cycle, which is why, the tagline, help you feel like yourself again, is kind of what I live on. Because at any of those times, and I've talked about women between the ages of 35 and 55 now, you may not feel like you. And that's because any number of those things are happening. And I would say, I know the sleep is a big deal, the weight gain's a big deal, the hair loss, but I think the number one thing is just not feeling like you. And all of a sudden you feel like kind of depressed and anxious and just yucky. Those are the symptoms that I feel are the most difficult for women to manage.
Yeah. And so I just learned about that progesterone steal from myself because I had just had like a pretty stressful couple weeks. Like it was short term, like the stress is over, but my period was so much worse, so much more symptomatic. So I was Googling and I'm like, oh, it's because I was stressed these like few weeks before my period. And progesterone, like you're saying, it's more that calming hormone. It helps to decrease stress, anxiety, and sleep. So I experienced that. So I learned it firsthand.
Yes, you did. And that with the estrogen then just running amok in your body it also physiologically builds up that extra lining in the uterine wall. So now your period is like this gush and heavy and it hurts, right? It hurts more because your poor little uterus is trying to get itself cleaned out. I mean, it's like we hate our bodies because we feel bad and symptomatic, but our body's just trying to keep us alive, man. I tell you all the time, it's just trying to keep you alive. You need to do your part.
Yes. And it goes back to that idea of how important stress is. And we don't always put these connections together, how stress affects our bodies so much. So tell us a little bit about, and sort of briefly, a little bit about the safety of bioidentical hormones and really the most gentle way to start with them too.
Yeah. So the World Health Organization in the early 2000s are, they set out to try to use estrogen replacement and progesterone replacement. Unfortunately, they were not using bioidentical hormones at that point. So that was probably their first main mistake, is that they were using hormones that were derived from pregnant mares, which is horse urine, and methylprogesterone, which is another form of progestins that are not bioidentical. So they were introducing this into women. Also, these women were, many of them, 10 years past menopause, in addition to the fact that they were not screened the way we screen people at this point. So when they introduced these hormones, they were not balanced. Some women were on the estrogen only, some were on the estrogen and the progestin only, or together. And as they moved along in this process, they were seeing things when they found that one of the women, I think it was one, it ends up the relative risk ends up being a 0.008 of the one woman that ends up with breast cancer. But of course, that's what media decides it's going to jump on top of. Oh yeah, this person ends up getting breast cancer. They were like, oh no, we have to stop. When you look back on the study, estrogen in particular got a very bad rap from the studies because they said it, quote, caused breast cancer. Well, now we know that relative risk was minor, super minor. In addition, the estrogen they were using was non-bioidentical. Bioidentical means that what you're putting into your body looks like something that your body's seen before. So bioidentical estrogen's made out of soy. Bioidentical progesterone's made out of yam materials from a yam. So our body knows what that is. It sees it. When you put something into your body that it doesn't recognize, your body wants to make it go away. It wants to wall it off and protect you. And that's basically how cancer can begin, how it can start. So even on the cases where the women were using Premarin or the horse urine derived estrogens, they still had less outcome of heart disease. Even with all and that was never highlighted. And so now we know if a woman starts replacing her hormones within the 10 years of menopause, she reduces her risk of heart disease by 50%. And keep in mind that heart disease is the number one killer of women over the age of 50. So these are all things that nobody ever talked about. For some reason, everybody glommed onto breast cancer. And keep in mind that most women are more likely to develop breast cancer over the age of 50 without hormones. This is a number that has been talked about for years, and it's when women did not have their hormones replaced. Now that we're following women with hormone, especially estrogen replacement, we are finding that if, in fact, they are identified with breast cancer after the implementation of estrogen, now their prognosis is better. And I have seen this in my practice. I have been replacing hormones for 7 years now. I have had 3 cases of onset of breast cancer after hormone replacement. That's 3 cases in 7 years of replacing hormones every day of my practice. And all 3 of those women are still here, still working, still doing their thing. We're still taking care of them. They were in, they were out, they are done. So there's just so much more that we're learning now. And I do want to throw out the resource Estrogen Matters. And I don't know if you've had anybody else on your podcast that's talked about that book, but that particular book is the one I recommend to all of my patients. Estrogen Matters. Avram Blooming is a physician oncologist who wrote the book. And he went back and went through all the studies and really gives a lot of the stats that I talked about today. It's written in a way that it's very informative and it's very reader friendly. So it gives you a lot more information about that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And even with those 3 people in your practice, it's like, you don't know if they would have gotten it anyways.
Well, the chances are absolutely. I mean, your chance over the age of 50 increases. Your chance increases to about 6%, 7% over the age of 50, no matter what. No matter what you do, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what's happening, that many people are going to get breast cancer. So you can either sit back and see if you're going to be in that number or have your hormones replaced and enjoy the benefits of better brain function, decreased incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia, decreased incidence of osteoporosis, decreased incidence of heart disease, and basically feeling a lot better, increased muscle mass, all the things you will feel and still keep the same incidence of breast cancer.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up those other diseases. And I'm sure I'll link the book Estrogen Matters down below because it has so many different effects on so many different systems in our body. So that's why it makes a difference in all those types of diseases. And real quick, is there like a gentle way to start hormones, like the topical versus ingesting? Does any of that matter?
Yeah, I think it does. I would say, Initially when I see perimenopausal women like yourself, if, you had this weird month and you're like, oh my goodness, what happened? Things went crazy. Typically my perimenopausal women, I'll start them on bioidentical progesterone capsules at night because it helps them sleep. It decreases the anxiety. You get a good night's sleep and the whole world changes. And we start at lower doses, maybe, 100 milligrams or, what have you. It depends on the patient, but we start at lower doses and typically dose at night. Younger women, let's say 20s, sometimes they'll use progesterone creams because their cycles are just a little off, or certain instances I usually don't give them those capsules. As we work our way into replacing testosterone, sometimes we'll use a lozenge or a cream, but testosterone's a little different. Testosterone we can use. I do subdermal replacement, which is pellet therapy with a lot of my patients. Those women, especially perimenopausal, you're running a million miles an hour. You know what your life is like. And if I offer you a cream, a testosterone cream, you're like, well, that was nothing. I just wasted $40 at the compounder. A lot of times we're using pellet therapy and subdermal replacement with those women. And then when you get to, as you move through perimenopause, sometimes I'll introduce estrogen cream because you're like, I am super sweaty right before my period. I can't sleep at night. I'm like, it's because your estrogen's really dropping. So let's talk about using a little bit of cream. And then as we get into the menopause and then postmenopause, many times I will transition those women to subdermal pellets, depending on how they're feeling, because that is really a better systemic overall release of hormones, requires a lot of supervision, which we measure blood, 6 weeks, 4 times a year, all the things. But that's kind of the progression I think that I use in general.
Yeah, that painted a good picture. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am so glad to have you on the podcast today. You shared so much valuable information and really helped to explain that foundation and then working through our hormones and really that importance and the safety and things to think about when it goes wanting to do the bioidentical hormone replacement. So also want you guys to know that I was on Kris's podcast, Get Personal with Dr. Kris, where she interviewed me and we talk about exercise, strength training, protein. So I'll have that link down below. So make sure you guys check that out. And anything else you want to share, Dr. Kris, before we hop off?
I think one of the most important things is get your hormones checked. If you don't feel like you, and you're doing all the right things, you're doing all the things that Michele talks about, you are exercising, you are watching what you eat, you're trying to get sleep, and you're trying to manage your stress. You're doing all the things, but you feel harried, you don't feel like yourself, you're not sleeping even though you used to sleep, your stress seems more out of control than it used to be, you just don't feel like yourself. Find a functional medicine doc, find a naturopathic physician, find somebody who specializes in hormonal replacement or just hormones in general, and get your blood work done. And then I think you'll be in good hands.
Yeah, awesome information. And I'm going to have Dr. Kris's links down below. She even has a clinic here in Phoenix, and I think she can work virtually with some people too. So make sure you guys check that out.